In a world where the rich literally throw people away like garbage, Rudo thought the worst thing that could happen was getting caught stealing their trash. Turns out he was dead wrong. After witnessing his foster father's brutal murder and getting framed for the crime, Rudo finds himself plummeting into the pit where all the city's waste gets dumped, including the humankind. Now he's got to survive in a literal hellscape of trash monsters and find his way back to the surface to clear his name and hunt down the real killer. Treat your possessions with care, and in time, they will develop a soul. But what if the situation were reversed? In a privileged society where apparently stitching isn't a thing, a little girl's mother's only solution to a small tear in her stuffed bunny was to throw it away. Wearing white and gold is the only fashion choice in this high-class society. They all seem to share the hobby of discarding their belongings as soon as possible. While these items no longer hold any value to these people, there are those less fortunate who'd give anything to get their hands on them. At the garbage collection site, such people can be found scavenging through the trash like vultures with a taste for chipped cutlery. These people are called trash raiders by the upper society and are seen as worse than filth. One such trash raider gets caught in the act by guards. The trash raider throws some of the trash at them, and the guards flop around as if they had been waterboarded with acid. The trash raider uses this opening to flee, but is not able to go too far before he is found again. The guards open fire at him. He dodges the first round of bullets like Neo, and then starts sprinting away. Despite dodging most bullets, the trash raider is grazed by one but manages to escape. Getting a firing squad for stealing a torn bunny rabbit is the atmosphere around this place. Devoid of most basic necessities, the other side of town is slums inhabited by people called tribesfolk. The news of Rudo's activities from yesterday starts spreading around. Chiwa, a girl living in the slums who doesn't seem to think of Rudo as a filthy rabid beast, warns him to stop trash raiding and putting his life on the line like that. Rudo had confidence in his ability. Plus, he would sell the stuff he took from the raids and use that money to cover his living costs. As the two of them are conversing, a bunch of delinquents show up. First, they make fun of Rudo by calling him stinkier than a fish market vendor, and then they go after his hands, which he keeps hidden with gloves. But what breaks the camel's back is when they mention his father. Evidently, these slums were first created to lock criminals away from the rich society adjacent to them. All the tribesfolk were their descendants and had been living honest lives, hoping to be welcomed back into high society. However, this hope was ruined by Rudo's father, who allegedly went on a killing spree. The hooligans start taunting Rudo about turning out just like his father, upon which Rudo gives them a stare you give when someone steps on your brand new Jordans. Regardless of what they had to say, Chiwa believed in Rudo and knew he wouldn't turn out like that. She then spots the bunny Rudo brought back and loves it. Rudo had planned to give it to her, but as the poor lad tries to tell her that after finally mustering up some courage, Chiwa's mother shows up and takes her back home. Rudo then heads back as well, where he is met by Rikto, his foster father, who greets him by doing an impression of Rudo trying to give Chiwa the bunny. Rikto had come to know about Rudo's trash diving as well and advised him against going that far, especially if he thought this was his way of repaying his debt to him or something. Rikto had found Rudo as an abandoned child and raised him as his own. To Rudo, Rikto was his only family. He did those raids to help Rikto out because he wanted to, not because he needed to. Rikto dressed Rudo's injury. The pain from the injury was nothing compared to what he had endured in the past. His father had left both his hands charred black, which would give him surges of pain from time to time. Although Rudo's father had been sentenced to death by being thrown in the pit for his crimes, what he did to Rudo didn't end with his life. Rudo would face scrutiny from everyone around him because of his hands. That was the case until he was found by Rikto, who gave him those gloves that also seemed to lessen the pain. What Rikto had done for Rudo was more than he could ever repay. He would have been perfect in Rudo's eyes if only he didn't tease Rudo about Chiwa all the time. After practicing his smile for Chiwa that looked like that of a constipated serial killer, Rudo goes over to her house to find her. On his way, he witnesses a live execution of a criminal in the pit. The pit was basically where all the trash was thrown, but it was also used to throw criminals into as a form of punishment. Chiwa pops up there as well, almost scaring Rudo to death. The pit had been positioned so that it was visible from every part of the slums. It could be said that it was done intentionally to keep in people's minds what fate awaited them if they were to ever stray from the path. Chiwa tells Rudo she never wanted to see him being thrown in there, so he should stop trash raiding because if he got caught, he could end up being sentenced to the pit. Rudo tells Chiwa that she was repeating the exact words Regto always told him, to which she replied, of course he would because he loved him too. Rudo, although it takes him 2 business days to figure out, realizes that meant Chiwa liked him. This realization sends Rudo rolling around on the floor with mixed emotions. He then quickly hands Chiwa the bunny and dashes away from there because staying any longer would explode his heart like a volcano. As he's heading back, he sees some apostles, the guards from the higher society. When he's finally back home, he wonders what kind of reaction Recto would give him when he tells him what just happened. But what he finds inside was a nightmare. A masked man had stabbed Recto and was standing over him. Before Rudo can do anything, the masked man stabs him too and calmly walks out with a mystery book as Rudo can only watch. Rudo goes over to Recto, who, with his final breath, tells him to run away this instant. His last words to Rudo were to change this wicked place. Then suddenly, the apostles enter the house and arrest Rudo for murdering Recto. Rudo tries telling them he wasn't the culprit and the real murderer was out there. But they don't listen, and when he resists, they knock him out cold. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself hanging from the contraption used to send criminals down into the pit. He was falsely accused. They were pinning the murder of his foster father on him, but no one questioned. They were all deluded, devoid of any independent thought, chanting for the sentence to be carried out like it was an exciting spectacle. Among them, Rudo spots the one person who would believe him, Chiwa. He shouts out he didn't do it, but even his final hope dies out. Chiwa believes the words of others and gives up on him too. That was it, Rudo's breaking point. As he's about to curse them, he spots the murderer among them, watching. But before he can say another word, the signal for the execution is given, and down he goes. Rudo pledges to get back at every single one of them as he falls into the pit, but he doesn't die. He ends up on a pile of trash. The smell was overwhelming, even for Rudo, which meant it was something else. There was no light, no life, and certainly no showers down here. Just piles upon piles of garbage. Then, all of a sudden, the trash behind him starts rising until it takes the form of a colossal monster made of rubbish. The pit truly was worse than anything he could have imagined. It was hell. While everyone was passionate about condemning the so-called filthy criminals to the pit, wondering why they committed such crimes and why the tribesfolk didn't understand, no one seemed to discuss what happened to these criminals after they were dropped into the terrifying pit. Right now, Rudo was about to learn firsthand what that aftermath was going to be like. Colossal monsters, made up of trash, start emerging one after the other. The scene seemed like something right out of hell. The air was so polluted and toxic that breathing it in for extended periods would lead to Rudo's lungs rupturing. Was he going to die like this? Is this going to be the end of his tale? Right as he's on the verge of giving up and accepting his fate, Regto's death flashes across Rudo's mind. He suddenly realizes he can't die just yet. He needed to get back at those who sent him here and branded him a criminal without listening to him. But even before that, he needed to find the man who killed Rigto and make him suffer a fate worse than death. His eyes light up with rage, and a new spirit awakens inside him as he grabs a metal pipe and smashes it across the face of a pit monster without even looking at it like a total badass. Meanwhile, from a distance, someone watches Rudo going berserk in the pit. Despite taking damage from the hostile environment, Rudo keeps going. He even trash talks the pit monsters, calling them stinkier than Ricto's farts, which must be unbearable since Rudo finds the toxic air preferable. Rudo grabs hold of a signpost and throws it better than most Olympic-level hammer throwers. As it slices off an arm of the beast, all this ruckus awakens 2 more, a snake-like and a ram-like pit monster. And suddenly Rudo is up against twice as many human-eating garbage titans. The 2 smelly titans clash with each other, ripping off massive chunks. Rudo seizes the opportunity, grabs a metal sheet, and leaps at one monster, slicing it from mouth to tail, causing it to explode and destroy the other beast. The battle was far from over, though, as another pit monster, far bigger than the two before it, emerges. It gets on its hind legs like the Brachiosaurus in that one scene from Jurassic Park and stomps its forelegs on the ground. As it stomps, Rudo tries to run, but the force sends a shockwave that throws him. Rudo tumbles and rolls and lands at the feet of a masked man with an umbrella, out for a leisurely walk across the pit. He grabs Rudo's collar, picks him up, and kicks him in the back. Before Rudo can retaliate, he grabs his face and sticks a mask on him. The mask filters the toxic air, allowing Rudo to finally breathe properly for the first time since he had been dropped into the pit. Rudo starts questioning the man right away about who he is and what is going on. The masked man unzips his mask and quietly tells Rudo to keep quiet. After inhaling poisonous air and battling giant monsters made out of rusty toasters and broken refrigerators for the past several minutes, keeping calm and quiet had long since been thrown out the window. Rudo bombards the man with questions about what is going on and what the pit, this underground, is exactly. The masked man tells him it isn't underground and tells him to quiet down once more. But after Rudo still doesn't listen and instead starts speaking even louder, the masked man, who had been quite patient all this time, finally snaps and starts yelling even louder. He tells Rudo they are not underground but above ground, thanks to all the garbage spherates like Rudo have thrown down here. He explains why he had been insisting on keeping a low voice. These monsters made up of garbage, called trash beasts, are sensitive to sounds produced by humans, and since they are indestructible using ordinary means and numerous in this area, he didn't want to attract their attention. But while telling Rudo all this, he yelled at a decibel level higher than a freight train, which caught all the trash beasts' attention, and they start rushing in. The masked man wasn't one to raise the roof of the place, but he couldn't deny how good it felt to let it all out. That's when a trash beast gets a little too close. The masked man sticks his umbrella out, which then catches fire, and right as the trash beast is about to swallow him whole, he points the umbrella in its direction. The spinning umbrella acts as an incinerator, completely obliterating the trash beast. What's more is that after disintegrating, it wasn't regenerating either. That was just one. A dozen more were left, waiting to charge him. But the masked man doesn't waver. He charges them head on, and in the blink of an eye, he pierces through several of the trash beasts, bringing all of them down like dominoes. As he casually glides down using his umbrella, Rudo wonders what kind of power or technology he is using that gives him so much destructive capability. If he could get his hands on this power somehow, it would be curtains for all his enemies. The biggest trash beast remained. It collects a kind of acidic fluid in its mouth and spits it straight at the masked man, who uses his umbrella to disperse it all around him, leaving himself completely unharmed. He then dashes at the final enemy, leaps into the air, charges his umbrella, points it at the trash beast like a missile, and unleashes the Umbreaker Octashater. It shreds through the trash beast with so much force that it gets completely annihilated. The masked man then walks back to Rudo. He takes off his headgear and then his mask and introduces himself as Injin, a simple cleaner down here in the pit. But the horrible stench of the pit makes him put his mask back on as fast as he took it off. Rudo passes out while Injin is blaming him for exposing him to this horrendous place. In his unconscious state, Rudo dreams of the past, back when he was beaten up by some kids for saying inanimate objects were alive. Recto had taught Rudo that if you take care of something long enough, it becomes inhabited by a soul. He encouraged Rudo to care for his belongings, but Rudo, as a child, took this to mean that objects were alive. Recto too believed that these everyday objects had souls inside them, and told Rudo to always take good care of his belongings. Rudo then regains consciousness and finds himself chained up and being dragged by Injin like a pile of trash. Rudo politely asks Injin why he is being carried like this, to which Injin replies that after Rudo passed out, he couldn't just leave him there, so he decided to take him along. Although his intentions were pure, his method was questionable. Rudo starts flopping around like a fish and tells Injin he has to go back up the top, which Injin referred to as the sphere, was always on the move. That, plus a few other factors, made getting back up there impossible for now. Rudo quickly picks up on the use of now by Injin. This meant that there was a way to get up there, in the sky. Rudo demands that Injin tell him about that, as well as the secret to his powers and this world, so he can get back up and exact his revenge on the person who killed Recto and everyone who condemned him to this fate. Rudo wasn't going to sit still until he did all that. At this point, Injin had just about enough of Rudo's shenanigans. Since he was so eager to find out about this place, the ground, he can do so to his heart's content as Injin leaves Rudo behind. A group of masked people finds him. They observe Rudo like he is some sort of alien and ask him if he is a spherate. Rudo answers that he is, upon which they all throw their masks off and gather around him in a frenzy. They ask Rudo if he really is a spherate and examine him up close to check if he is alive, as if Rudo were a ghost. Apparently, finding a live spherate around here was as rare as finding an air freshener in this place. One of them, their boss, takes pity on Rudo the way he is all chained up and starts removing the chains. Rudo starts thinking these are decent, nice people, far better than that douche Injin, but the next second, Rudo is chained up inside a truck. These people were no saints. They were spherate traffickers who would sell someone like Rudo to the highest bidder. The trash that spherates kept throwing down here continued to pile up, creating poisonous air all around and even monsters made out of garbage. There were plenty of people down here who knew someone who was crushed under that pile, was killed by one of the monsters, or died from air poisoning. This created a deep hatred for all who lived on the sphere among the locals here, and they would love to get their hands on a cursed spherate so they could get payback. The leader of the kidnappers then grabs a pile of rotten food and starts shoving it down Rudo's mouth. Suddenly, his joy turns into horror as Rudo strips the flesh off his fingers. Just like the people above, folks down here kept blaming others and putting labels on them. Rudo was fed up with this. He was fed up with being treated like he shouldn't exist by everyone. An aura of red energy starts wrapping around the chains, and Rudo breaks free. He is now overflowing with power. Injin looks on from a nearby location. Rigto's words about a soul inhabiting objects that had been well cared for repeat in Rudo's mind. He grabs hold of the chain, and it floods with power. People who could give life to objects and draw out their power were called givers, and it wasn't a common trait amongst spherates. The leader of the kidnappers orders his goons to kill Rudo immediately. They charge him, but Rudo's chains are one heck of a threat. So one of them aims for the chain and dislodges it from Rudo's grasp, since givers' power lies in their objects. But to the kidnappers' horror, Rudo could use more than one object as he picks up a tire. Two very different reactions are received from this feat, and Rudo slams the tire on the kidnapper's face. After slamming everyone with the tire, only the boss was left. Rudo had a worse fate in mind for him, but is stopped at the last second by Injin. Rudo regains his composure and tries to process what just happened. This power had taken a toll on Rudo's body. Injin apologizes for leaving Rudo like that, but he needed to verify his powers. Now that he had verified them, Injin tells Rudo he needs people like him and invites him to join the cleaners. But Rudo politely says no. Injin calls a comrade of his from the cleaners and tells him they caught themselves a big catch this time. A natural just roaming around in the no man's land waiting to become trash beast fodder. Though he's a bit rough around the edges and a little ugly, he could prove to be a great asset to them. Rudo, lying on a bed on the opposite side of the room getting treatment, can hear all of this crystal clear. He reminds Injin that he said nothing about joining no washers or whatever they called themselves. His only goal was to gather information and get back to the surface to exact his sweet revenge on those who wronged him. Rudo, however, gets cut off mid-conversation by the kooky old doctor who looked like he got his degree during the Pharaoh's rule. The doctor screams at Rudo, with a stare that would even scare death itself, and says he should be grateful because his lungs would have ruptured and he would have choked had Injin left him there in the pit, and tells him to be more grateful to his savior. So now Rudo was kind of indebted to Injin. The doctor finishes Rudo's treatment and throws the two of them out, although not before making it clear that he was a she, a very old she who spits in your face while talking. Rudo thanks Injin for paying for his bill, but makes it clear he was still not going to join his team. Injin tells him to be careful then, as Rudo had already gotten a taste of how the locals here felt about spherates like him. If he needed information, he wasn't just going to get it served on a silver platter for free. He would have to work for it. Injin treats Rudo to some food after he had previously barfed all of the garbage food fed to him earlier by the locals that abducted him. Rudo was surprised to see buildings, food, and people living normal lives down here. In his mind, this place should have been nothing but a garbage heap. Yet life was flourishing. Since Rudo was going to stay here, on the ground, for a while now, Injin decided it was necessary that he be schooled about some important things. First off, just like the trash that piled up here, emotions were no different. These pent-up emotions were referred to as anima, and just leaving them be could result in varying consequences. One such consequence was the birth of trash beasts from anima. They are extremely hostile to people and wouldn't shy from chomping on half a dozen. Mostly residing in the pit area, they would venture into human civilization from time to time. Rudo asks Injin why didn't the humans just close off the town and seal it. But the answer to that was pretty simple. Humans don't like to be cooped up like chickens for too long, even if they have to risk their lives against living, man-eating trash for it. What's more was that anima was the core or center of these creatures, which is why they were impossible to beat with normal weapons. However, some special weapons could do the trick, like Rudo's gloves, for instance, and Injin's fabulous umbrella that he called Umbreaker, or a chef's trusty knife that he keeps sharpened for years, or a writer's lucky pen. They were all capable of being used against trash beasts. The reason behind that had to do with the story Ricto had told Rudo about taking care of objects long enough and eventually a soul inhabits them. The soul in this case was drawing out the anima inside these objects and using them as a powerful weapon. Rudo had been proven right after all. Injin tells Rudo that not everyone could draw out these powers. Only a select few people were capable and were given the name Givers. Givers were able to extract power from these anima-filled objects called vital instruments. Both Rudo and Injin were givers. Now to the main part. Cleaners were basically a team of givers whose purpose was to exterminate trash beasts, and they needed more people like them in their ranks. People like Rudo. Rudo asks Injin if he was really going to help him if he joins these wipers or whatever. Injin tells him he would love to, but he has no idea how to do that either. Meanwhile, a very sus-looking cat watches these two with intent. All this Injin had kept poor Rudo under the illusion that he knew a way of going back to the surface. But in the end, he was as useful as a used scratch card. Injin's boss, however, might know, as he was pretty knowledgeable, at least according to Injin. While Rudo grunts at the idea of meeting someone even crazier than Injin, Injin asks him about his gloves. Rudo tells him he got these from his father, and they were now the only thing he had in his possession to remember him by. All these years Rudo had kept very good care of them, which is why anima had entered them. Injin advises Rudo to cherish them, making Rudo tear up a little. Injin then gets a message and tells Rudo to wait here for a bit. But before he leaves, Rudo gets up and formally thanks him for everything he has done for him thus far. Injin tells him it was no sweat and throws him a bag of money to spend if needed. Rudo didn't feel he deserved it, but Injin tells him he totally did since this was the money he got in exchange for selling Rudo's clothes. In fact, all the hospitality Injin had shown thus far, including the medical treatment and the food, was covered directly by Rudo's clothes. Suddenly, it all made sense. Why would this man go out of his way to help Rudo like this? In a way, Rudo had been helping himself all this time. Injin then leaves to go and meet with the man who was supposedly going to be Rudo's trainer. Rudo takes back every nice thing he had said to him and vows to kick his butt and leave his crappy team as soon as he gets the information he needs. Suddenly, the cat from before jumps down and snatches Rudo's money. Rudo immediately sprints after the thieving cat. The cat runs into a dark alleyway. Rudo finds an oddly shaped stick there and takes it to capture the cat. He finally gets close enough and uses the stick to pin the cat to the ground to get his money back. His troubles were, however, far from over. Now comes the owner of that stick, and he was, let's just say, not very pleased that Rudo had stolen his precious stick. This lame old stick he was holding in his hands was precious. The man then snatches the stick from Rudo, sniffs it for some reason, and tells him he was now going to teach him a lesson for stealing people's stuff. Rudo notices that he too had an emblem resembling that of Injin's, which meant this guy was a cleaner too. The erratic stick-loving cleaner then charges up his vital instrument. a stick that he named Asidaf very classy, and transforms his stick into a fearsome weapon. He smashes the ground at Rudo's feet and tells him he knew who he was. His own name was Zanka Nijiku, a member of the Gachiakuta cleaners, and he was the one who was put in charge of training Rudo. Zanka's first lesson for Rudo was to not steal from people if he didn't want his butt handed to him. Rudo tries to explain he was only using his stick to get his money back from the cat and that this was just one big misunderstanding. But Zanka wasn't listening. He even insults Recto by saying Rudo should tell his parents they didn't raise him right. There was a limit, and Zanka had crossed it. How dare he insult Recto for no reason? Rudo's eyes glow red with rage, but then he quickly remembers something Recto had taught him back when he was a little kid. That sometimes you should cool your head and try to think about how the other person felt. Rudo decides to test out this theory of Recto's and puts himself in Zanka's shoes for a moment. This staff, which Zanka called a Sidaf, must have been precious to him. Just as Rudo wouldn't be happy if he lost his gloves, Zanka was probably upset because the staff meant something to him. So Rudo owns up to his mistake and apologizes sincerely. This instantly turns Zanka into a very chill guy. Rudo couldn't believe this consideration thing actually worked. Zanka even starts making small talk and asking about Rudo's gloves and what their powers were. Rudo didn't really know about that yet, but more importantly, what was actually going on right now. Rudo then suddenly remembers Ricto's advice about smiling more. So he tries his best to force a smile out of his rusty frown. What results is a face that not even a mother could love. Zanka looks at Rudo. He stops speaking all of a sudden and just stares at Rudo for a moment before snapping at him for trying to mock him. Rudo was flabbergasted. In his mind, he was making $1 million smile, but to others it was probably more cursed than Annabelle. Rudo tries again, but this time it's like a shrunken head with its stitches removed. Zanka gets extra pissed and asks Rudo if he was nuts. Why was he doing that? Rudo didn't understand. He was just trying to smile during a basic conversation. So what was so wrong about it? Both of them start blowing their tops at each other over a silly misunderstanding. Zanka tells Rudo not to be so arrogant just because Injin called him a natural. Then he goes off on him for his goal, which was to help the cleaners until he finds a way of getting back up on the surface. He goes as far as insulting Rudo's goal and calling him not serious. Rudo had just about had enough now. First he insulted Recto, and now the goal he was chasing was to honor Recto's dream of changing the terrible world on the surface. Rudo goes over to the nearest trash can, grabs a busted wiper, and transforms it into a vital instrument. This shocks Zanka, who thought Rudo's vital instrument was his gloves. But then the realization hits him. Rudo could turn any object he touches into a vital instrument. It made sense why Injin called him a natural. But while Rudo has his special abilities, there was still something that he lacked. Experience, and even a moderately experienced giver like Zanka was enough to take him down. Zanka then has his staff fall from above and strike the ground Rudo was standing on out of nowhere. Rudo's ability was special, but he hadn't been able to practice it at all. Zanka, on the other hand, was an experienced cleaner who risked his life daily fighting dangerous trash beasts. The difference in their skills was very obvious. Rudo stood no chance, and very quickly Zanka had Rudo pinned on the ground with his stick. It was all over for Rudo, it seemed. There was no way he could beat Zanka. Or was there? Zanka notices a dirt stain on his cheek. He wipes it with his finger and sniffs it. This was no ordinary dirt stain. Zanka then quickly looks at Rudo's vital instrument. The wiper that he had been swinging around all this time was not a wiper at all, but a dirty plunger instead. Zanka's soul almost leaves his body for a moment. He tries telling Rudo what the thing he had been holding all this time actually was, but Rudo wasn't getting it. Rudo picks the plunger up again and points it at Zanka. He then starts swinging it around him, quickly turning Zanka into a professional-level limbo player all of a sudden as he perfectly dodges the human fecal matter flying off the nasty tool. Zanka then makes a run for it. Rudo hadn't realized what was actually happening, but for some reason this mysterious weapon of his held the power equal to that of Excalibur. So he chases after him with his deadly tool. What ensues afterward is a very bizarre version of a cat and mouse chase where the mouse is a grown man, and the cat is a kid trying to unknowingly get poop all over him. After their little maze chase, they run out into the open on the road. As he's running, Zanka comes across the same cat that had stolen Rudo's money earlier. This makes him lose speed for a short instant, giving Rudo all the time he needed to make the final blow. Rudo leaps into the air, holding the plunger firmly with both hands. Zanka desperately tries to get away. Tears were coming out of his eyes at this point as he realizes his fate is sealed. Even the cat was trying its best to get away from there as quickly as possible. Rudo swings his mighty sword and spills the excrement all over Zanka, finishing him with just one attack. Driving around in his jeep, Injin was returning to collect Rudo when he found these two. Rudo was sitting in a daze while Zanka was lying on a pile of garbage, looking worse than a petrified raccoon. After learning what had been going on, Injin couldn't help but burst out laughing. These two had finally made peace after Rudo hit him with a poop barrage. An unorthodox yet effective method. Rudo had now realized what he had been swinging around so ferociously all this time. He notices there was someone else in the jeep with them as well. Zanka was even more traumatized since among ground dwellers, he was what would be known as a spoiled kid. Getting splashed with poop was certainly a first for him. That being said, Zanka was the most skilled at controlling vital instruments in the cleaners, according to Injin, and was going to show Rudo the ropes. Zanka was in disbelief that Injin actually thought he was good. The person in the back, Ryu, finally decides to get up. She was interested in Rudo too. Well, his hair at least. Thinking that perhaps they were dyed at first until realizing how a person who can't even afford shampoo could dye their hair. Rudo, on the other hand, had completely forgotten about the poop incident. A woman was casually playing with his hair. Maybe life down here on the ground wasn't as horrible as he had thought. Injin announces their next stop, home, Aka Cleaners HQ, as they drive through the vast desert fields outside of town. Rolling through the dusty desert, they passed endless stretches of wasteland, once filled with things of value that were now buried beneath layers of sand and time. The relics of a forgotten world caught dust, quite literally, as the jeep rumbled by. It was Rudo's first road trip, and the experience was nothing short of surreal. Injin brought the jeep to a halt, kicking up a final bit of sand as the engine shut down. One by one, they stepped out. They had arrived. The cleaners' headquarters stood before them. An immense, towering structure unlike anything Rudo had ever seen. His jaw dropped as he took it in, eyes wide with awe. It was the HQ, the heart of the cleaners' world. They enter the building, and everyone parts ways from that point on. Ryu tells Rudo she'll see him later, but Rudo hoped she didn't since she'll just tease him more. Injin introduces Rudo to the receptionist for the cleaners, Semiu. Everyone who wanted to join the cleaners would first get looked at by her. Injin is about to explain her abilities when Semiu suddenly slices two flies in two with her fork all at the same time. After that dramatic first impression, she warmly greets Rudo and welcomes him to the cleaners. She tells him she had heard everything about him from Injin already. Her powers were quite unique compared to what had been seen previously, since her glasses were her vital instrument. She used them to boost her kinetic vision. This allowed her to see what a person was truly made out of. She activates her vital instrument and focuses on Rudo. Abruptly, her vision glitches out, and she remains stunned for a brief moment. Injin asks if she saw anything. She returns to normal and answers him. Rudo was fairly good at athletic stuff, so he wouldn't need to train especially hard for it. She also saw that Rudo had a good relationship with his vital instrument, but the part where he struggled was the way he used it. He would need some practice before learning to properly draw out his vital instrument's powers. Injin asks if there was anything else worth noting, to which Semiu replies Rudo had a tiny bit of poop stuck to the back of his neck, probably left over from his poop plunger swinging escapade. Injin bursts out into laughter, realizing now why the fly from earlier would keep circling Rudo. Injin thanks Semiu for the help and tells her he's taking Rudo to go and see their boss. There were round about 100 or so cleaners all in all, which included combatants, sentinels, and supporters. Since their work took them all over the place, it was rare to find them all gathered here at HQ at the same time. So Injin decides to acquaint Rudo with some of the fellas. Coincidentally, the entire workforce was there that day. Injin opens the door and quickly shuts it back up as he tells Rudo to put a rain check on that one. He then takes Rudo to the boss's office. Rudo is about to storm in right away when Injin stops him. He reminds Rudo that asking for what he wanted right off the bat won't do. Information was a commodity here and had its price. He needed to first assure him that he will be working here. Injin also gives Rudo the heads up to not ask their boss about his vital instrument abilities. Injin had explained his because he needed to in order to gain Rudo's trust. But their boss's power remained a mystery, even to cleaners like Injin. No one knew what his vital instrument was or what power it held. That being said, all of them still followed him, which was a loyalty you earn not only from skill, but from building trust between each other as well. Injin then finally opens up the door, but there was no one in there. Semiyu shows up and tells him she forgot to mention that their boss had gone on a business trip and won't be back for a few days at least. Injin asks if he gave them an estimate on when that will be, but nothing. Injin sighs and wishes their boss would act in a little more disciplined manner. That's when Ryu appears out of nowhere and asks Injin to let her take Rudo on a mission. Rudo couldn't join until the boss returns, so this will be like training for him. Semiyu begins to explain their client's request. A town near the polluted zone had reported small trash beasts approaching their barricade and wanted it handled. Rudo didn't know about the polluted zone. Injin tells Semiyu he just referred to it as the dump area for him. Semiyu then starts explaining things a little for Rudo, which the half-witted Injin failed to do. The ground was divided into habitable zones called safe zones, where humans lived, and inhospitable garbage-tainted zones called polluted zones where trash beasts lived. Among these polluted zones, there were parts where not even the most seasoned cleaners would venture into. These were the no man's lands. This area could kill an ordinary person in no time. There were 6 of these down here, and the one where Rudo landed was one of them. If Injin hadn't found him, Rudo would have been history. Speaking of Injin, Semiyu asks him what exactly he was doing there, to which he replies he was just on a casual walk, stretching his legs and stuff. Semiyu mentions that the air there is so toxic, it can kill a person in just 15 minutes. She then gives Rudo a mask to wear for his trainee session. As he's heading to the polluted zone, he wonders how long he stayed in the polluted zone. He then gazes at the polluted zone in front of him. Seeing its decrepit, hostile appearance, Rudo thinks this is what he imagined the pit would look like from up there. He had no idea there were entire communities living here. Rudo wondered if the ones who threw him down here knew that as well. What others saw as garbage, Rudo saw as treasures that he could take back with him and fix. Rudo then asks Ryu who the other people accompanying them were. Ryu tells him they were cleaners too, just like her, called supporters. Their job was more about cleaning up than combat since they weren't givers. One of them, Gris Rubian, a large bulky fellow, extends his hand to greet Rudo. Rudo does the same but instantly gets his hand crushed like a grape. Ryu starts laughing and tells Rudo he was famous for his godly grip strength. While Ryu is having a blast, Rudo wondered if he could fit in here. But what mattered right now was observing what they do and try to soak up as much of it as he can. Someone shouts "Trash beast spotted." Then trash beasts start coming out, numbering in the dozens. Rudo starts panicking, so Ryu tells him to take it easy. They were just tiny oryx-looking trash beasts. Rudo agreed. They were considerably smaller and less deadly than what he went up against in the no man's land. Then come out the larger bull trash beasts. 5 times as large, 10 times as powerful, and 100 times more volatile. They trample over the smaller ones and start ramming the barricade with deadly force. Rudo starts panicking again. Ryu assures him they were just slightly larger versions of the ones before them as they start to break through the barricade. She was very calm and even starts talking about throwing Rudo a welcome party once they're free from here. Rudo asks her how she could remain so level-headed in a situation like this. Ryu tells him that was the job. Being cool and laid back was a part of the deal when it came to being a cleaner or even just living on the ground. Rudo gets what she was saying. Injin was like that too. Maybe this is what he lacked all this time. So Rudo decides to remain composed from now on too. Right as he decides that, the mother of all trash beasts bursts out of the garbage heap. Rudo tries maintaining his cool and asks Ryu for affirmation, but even she thought this one was ridiculous. Ryu becomes enamored with the unique style of this trash beast and starts walking towards it. She takes out a pair of scissors while Rudo stands there wondering what happened to keeping cool. Ryu starts drawing power from her scissors and throws them in the air. They transform and she leaps to catch them in her foot. Before getting to the main course, Ryu wanted some appetizer as she faces a herd of the bull trash beasts charging at her from all directions. Ryu takes her stance, and when they get in her radius, she does a spinning kick that takes off all of their heads in an instant. Rudo was baffled. He had no idea what she was doing or why she held the scissors in her feet. Gris tells him that those scissors were Ryu's vital instrument called the Ripper. Using them with her feet was just a preference. Gris then tells Rudo not to drop his guard as a trash beast prepares to charge him from the back. Gris grabs it by the head and pins it. Then he uses his brute strength to throw the trash beast over to Ryu so she could finish it off. One after the other, Gris and the rest of the supporters knock or crush the trash beasts and send them to Ryu for disposal. Even though they didn't have powers like Ryu or Rudo, they were making the best use of what they could do while Rudo just stood there doing nothing. In a matter of minutes, they wipe out a majority of the trash beasts in that vicinity. The only one left now was the big one. Ryu heads in for the kill. To keep the smaller trash beasts from getting in her way, Gris orders the other supporter to take them apart so she can fight that thing without any distractions. The less experienced supporter trips over the horn of an unkilled trash beast. The trash beast charges him and Gris had his arms full to help him. It seemed like it was over for him when Rudo jumps in with a metal pipe and blocks the trash beast. Being a burden to everyone was not helping. He needed to prove his worth so he could join the cleaners and get his info. Rudo starts drawing power out of the pipe. It changes shape in a flash, nearly impaling the rookie supporter as well, but something was wrong. Rudo had forgotten how to use his powers. All he could do was keep holding the trash beast off as it pressed harder and harder against his vital instrument. Rudo is about to get overwhelmed when out of nowhere, Ryu strikes the trash beast. She praises Rudo for instinctively stepping in to help someone in danger. Gris apologizes to Ryu and Rudo for his junior's carelessness. He asks Ryu if she had already taken care of the big one. Ryu tells him she was actually having a bit of trouble with it. She had sliced that thing a couple of times with her vital instrument, but it didn't go down. This was very bizarre because normally trash beasts would go down the same way as any other thing if you strike them at its weak spot. Ryu doesn't dawdle on it and instead decides to just tear it apart enough that it can no longer move. Gris tells her they'll log this information down since it was new and even warn the neighboring towns about it. Rudo tries to speak up and ask her what he was supposed to do, but he couldn't. He had no confidence in himself anymore, so he just stood there without saying a word. Ryu leaps at the giant trash beast and thinks about giving it a new hairstyle. She gets on top of its head and slices off the hair like projections there in a flash, turning its hairstyle from dreadlocks to a buzz cut. While she is up there, Ryu notices something inside the shining light coming out of the trash beast's head. The trash beast shakes her off and starts reattaching its projections to hide its weak spot. All of a sudden, its eyes start to glow and it starts slamming its head into the ground repeatedly. Ryu was back on its head and had stuck her scissors down the glowing crevice she found. Gris warns Rudo to move out of the way when it slams its head again and also uses its projections to break open the ground below. Rudo gets caught up in this. As he's falling, he thinks about how arrogant and foolish he was for thinking he could get revenge from Recto's killer and everyone on the surface that did him wrong. He couldn't use his powers and was a constant burden to those around him. What was he even doing here is the last thing that crosses his mind as he accepts his fate. That's when Gris grabs his hand and pulls him out. He puts Rudo on his back and starts running away from the trash beast. Gris didn't know why Rudo just gave up back there, but if Rudo had a goal in his mind he wanted to achieve, he must keep fighting and running towards it. If he lacked inspiration, then all he needed to do was take a look around him. Meanwhile, Ryu keeps attacking the giant trash beast. More and more pieces of its head keep getting sliced off, and it starts letting out screams. Ryu takes the screams as a sign that her method was working. She leaps into the air and positions herself on the Ripper. Like an arrow, she pierces straight through the back of its head and out its mouth, taking out a chunk of the glowing part with her. The trash beast immediately starts to dismantle and collapse. Gris wondered if she had finally beat it. As the dust clears, Gris runs up to Ryu to ask if she beat it. Ryu answers it died as soon as she took this thing that she held in her hand out. It was what was powering it. But there was a problem. It was a vital instrument. A vital instrument inside a trash beast? Gris and Ryu were stumped. This was beyond anything they had ever seen before. Around the same time, the leader of the gang who tried to sell Rudo off wakes up in a pile of trash somewhere. He wonders where he was and traces his steps. The last thing he could remember was Rudo kicking his butt. That's when he notices a man sitting on the couch in front of him, so he asks him who he was. The hooded man turns his head and asks him where that Spherate boy was right now.